This
to our
conference will now be.
welcome everyone to our December combined investigator coordinator call. Hard to believe that it's already December, but such is the way time is flying. Next slide. The agenda for today is our usual recruitment updates, and then I'm going to pass the torch over to Shahzad and other members of our engagement team to talk a little bit about strategies for effective investigator coordinator partnerships at sites. And then we'll end with a few general updates and an announcement about our outcome certification form. Next slide. So we have 42 sites selected. All 42 are now activated. Last week, we hit our 200 mark, which is really amazing. So thanks to Riley for getting us just up to 200. I know that we've had a few other randomizations this week, which is even better. 33 of our sites have recruited at least one participant. Unfortunately, 9 of our sites thus far have really failed to launch, and we'll be following up with those 9 sites in the next couple of weeks to see whether they still have interest. Children's Hospital of the King's Daughter in Norfolk and Cincinnati Children's remain our recruitment leaders with 16 participants each, which is awesome. Next slide. Here is our recruitment graph by month. The green line was our original study goal, and as you could see, we had hoped to have 425 participants by the early part of the fall. The orange line is the number of participants who have actually been consented, and the blue line at the bottom, the number that have been randomized. And you can see that we've just crossed that 200 mark. We are continuing to recruit. PCORI, our funder, has given us the green light to continue our recruitment beyond what we had originally planned, and so we are going to do just that. We do have a sense of urgency to recruit as many patients as possible. We're not quite sure how much more time we'll have left to recruit, but it should be at least another year. Next slide. Shahzad, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. Really happy to see a good engagement and participation on the call today. So as Mike pointed out, we continue to have this gap between what we hoped for at this stage and what we actually are. Off late, we have also noticed that there's been a drop-off in the number of randomized patients over the last 4 to 5 months, with only 4 patients randomized in October and 6 in November. And December seems to be a little bit better. We'll see how this trends out. We've certainly seen that trend at our center as well with newly diagnosed patients, so there may be some seasonality to it. But this has sort of dovetailed and occurred at the same time that we are noticing a significant drop-off in data submission about screening and pre-consenting data that each site is supposed to be submitting. This may be reflective of center-specific staff transitions, but despite that, almost half of the centers seem to be missing key processes that they are supposed to be submitting on a regular basis. There seems to be a little bit of a disconnect from actual outcomes from this, in the sense that some of the centers who are not submitting data still seem to be engaged and have randomized patients. So there may be something that we may need to sort of look at. And if you're one of those centers that have not recruited a patient yet, there may be some opportunities that we will present later on for you guys to sort of hardwire some processes that can help change that metric for you. We have recognized that staff turnover seems to be a recurrent theme and changes from center to center and month to month. and there may be some opportunities for new staff that is being onboarded to learn some processes from ICN combined perspective that we will share later on. And we also recognize the conflicts that exist from multiple participations in different studies through ICN. That is also an added conflict or a stressor to each center in either submitting data or approaching patients. Next slide, please. So we're going to sort of share some best practices that we have learned from other centers, how to operationalize the key aspect of a site's function, which is the PI coordinator partnership. Next slide, please. This stems from having a great collaboration and a great communication piece. This graph sort of talks about the site's numbers based on randomization per month. As Mike pointed out, CHKD, Cincinnati Children's, and Stanford are randomizing patients at a rate of about 0.6 to 0.9 per month. But there are lots of opportunities on the other end of the graph there that things can get improved, hopefully with some attention to the collaboration that exists between the PI and the coordinator, and then secondary from that collaboration, awareness and engagement with other providers at the center. Next slide, please. So I've talked about that, improved collaboration leads to better communication and a teamwork and team science. And with team being together, everyone achieves more. And there are opportunities to make that hardwired in your center. Next slide, please. So one of the key things that we have recognized is a regular meeting between the PI and the coordinator, which is either the ICN coordinator or research coordinator. This affords opportunity to review combined specific as well as patient specific information in a very structured and considered way. You can during this meeting, review the upcoming clinic appointments and infusion visits, and think about approaching patients on the list. This also is an opportunity to review patient schedule reports that we will talk about later on, and also an opportunity to review the provider review needed report, which is a hardwire, hard stop step in the combined visits. A lot of times, the PI and the coordinator completes this report at the time of the regularly scheduled meeting, which could be weekly or every other week. I've included a screenshot of the tool that we developed for the combined sites about having this review structured on a regular basis. We do this on a Dayton, and again, this was shared with each site when they were activated early on. This is also an opportunity to review efficiency of processes at your site and center, and also provides an additional layer of oversight, which is definitely appreciated by the local IRB, which is relying on the central IRB in a big way. This is also an opportunity to review the ongoing adverse events and serious adverse events, because you can pull up that report from combined website right there and then. And then you can also think about how to sort of navigate potential subjects and plan for approaching these patients based on the report and the clinic visits and the infusion visits. Next slide, please. Another opportunity to really review upcoming patients is to be participant in the population management meetings. If your center and site has a hardwired process of population management, this affords opportunities for patients to review patients who are admitted to the hospital, or who are having a flare, or who are coming up for anti-TNF infusion. And this also is an opportunity to share information about the combined study with all the participants in the population management meetings. We have a Dayton every other week, all division population management meeting that we sort of review all patients who are either admitted to the hospital, who are having an issue, who have a care stratification score that bubbles them up to the situational awareness thing, and this is an opportunity that we can talk about potential recruitment for patients into studies and combine. And this is also an opportunity to sort of navigate some questions that can come up from providers where they're present for this population management meeting. Next slide, please. You can also use, and we've shared this before as well, a combined email template that can be shared with all the providers, notifying them of a potential study candidate that can come up during the population management or the regular weekly meeting between the PI and the coordinator. This includes not only about the patient specific to that provider, but can also be utilized to share some combined information like the frequently asked questions, some of the posters and the talking points, and then also offers an opportunity to share support for the study. How does the provider want us to approach the patient? Oftentimes the provider wants to approach the patient initially directly by themselves and then introduce the study coordinator or research coordinator to the patient, and then the coordinator can take it from there. This affords a great warm handoff between the provider and the study team. And then the provider and the coordinator can then follow up with the patient and the provider after the email is sent out to see how things are going where. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand over now to our coordinator extraordinaire, Kim Shelley. She can share some of the other exciting things that are happening from a coordinator perspective that the PIs may be either aware of, and if they're not aware of, they should be aware of, because that's a great opportunity to share real-time information between the coordinators. So Kim, all yours.
Thanks, Shahzad. The slide here is an example of Slack. Slack is a tool that the coordinators are using to have real-time communication in order to get their questions answered, share what they're doing, steal shamelessly. So this is a place we've actually put a channel in for research, and all of the combined coordinators have been invited, and if you haven't accepted that invitation or downloaded Slack, I encourage you and challenge you to go ahead and do so. It really is a great place to get some real-time information. It's just one more place. This doesn't eliminate reaching out to the sources that you've had your questions go to in the past. It's just one more place that you might be able to get quicker information or be able to pick the brains of your counterparts and centers throughout the country and what they're doing and how they do it or how they handled something. And also for some of you coordinators who are just combined and not on ICN, and you may need to ask a question about ICN. If your ICN coordinator isn't available, it's a great place to throw out some of those questions about ICN as well. So it really is a terrific resource and a terrific tool. Next slide. And Shahzad talked about partnering with the PI and reviewing some of the reports and how to use and where to find these reports. When you're in the registry and you're at that select participant page, you just click on the green button that says view reports, and then you select your report. When you're looking at your patient schedule report, it's color coded, and the pink ones, for example, feel free to go back and maybe put in some of that additional information or answer the queries with regard to that. The yellow ones, look at that range and either make sure that they have an upcoming appointment in that time period or finish entering the data. And just make sure that, green is good. Try to have as many greens as you can. With the provider review report, I like to bring it in. I like to put notes on it with the patients. I like to, just put it there for my PI and let him kind of go through it. Many times we actually complete these reviews in our session, and that's been very, very helpful. And with regard to AEs and SAEs, I just run that report, make sure that that loop is closed. Anything ongoing we discuss and make sure that we have an action plan on, and that offers excellent oversight. And the PIs and the IRBs really appreciate it. Next slide, and I think this is where Mike comes in.
Thank you so much. So yes, I will pick up from here. A couple of general study updates. The first is that we will not be having a investigator coordinator call in January. Our calls would be the first week of the month, and I think many of you, including myself, will be on vacation. So we will have a doubly important February meeting in lieu of a January meeting. I also want to let everyone know that our supplemental data collection has been rolled out, and we will be sending out queries to you all soon. But you certainly don't need to wait for our queries to begin to use the supplemental data form when needed. So as a reminder, the COMBINE study is an add-on to the work that all of us are doing for the Improved Care Now registry. And so we have been very cognizant of that and have not asked sites to double enter any data. So the things that you would ordinarily be putting into the Improved Care Now registry, like SID rates and hemoglobins and whatnot, we don't ask you to put them into the COMBINE forms, but rather we're able to link between the COMBINE data collection system and the Improved Care Now data collection system. What that means is that we expect that for every COMBINE visit and visit date, we should be able to find a Improved Care Now visit and visit date. That's not always the case. I know many of you might sneak in a COMBINE visit when a patient is having an infusion, and for some reason that site is deciding not to enter that into the Improved Care Now registry, or forgets to enter it into the Improved Care Now registry, or whatever it may be. That's okay in both our screening visit for COMBINE as well as each of the follow-up visits for COMBINE. There's a special section where you can enter the data that would otherwise be in the registry directly into the COMBINE forms. And there is information and guidance on how to use all of that has been posted to SharePoint. When we send out these materials, you can go to the hyperlink that's shown here. Let me pause for a minute and see if any of the investigators or coordinators have any questions about that. This is super important. It seems like about 20% of the time or so, we are unable to find a registry visit to match to the COMBINE visit. And so that means that things like SID rates and CRPs and hemoglobins are missing. We know that the sites actually did these tests. For example, we collect a white count in the COMBINE form, and so there should be a hemoglobin or hematocrit in the Improved Care Now form, but we just can't find them anywhere. So questions at all about this? And someone may be having a background conversation. You can put your phone on mute. Looks like there's a question in the chat box. Let me figure out if I'm smart enough to figure out how to read it. So when do we use supplemental data form? Only if correlating visit in Improved Care Now. So the supplemental data form is used for all COMBINE visits for which the site is not entering a Improved Care Now registry visit. If you are entering an Improved Care Now registry visit, great. Then there's nothing else that you need to do. But if for some reason you're not going to enter a Improved Care Now visit into that Improved Care Now registry, we need you to do the supplemental data form. Does that make sense, Alicia?
Yep.
Great. Kim asked, what about the EDC upload? Yes, that will help. Although for those places that are doing the EDC uploads to the Improved Care Now registry, there still is the part of the registry that doesn't get transferred, like lab values. So that part will still need to be done. Kim, does that make sense?
It does. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. All right, hearing no other questions and seeing nothing else in the chat box, we can move on to the next slide.
Hey, Mike, did you
Mike,
see Mallory's
Oh,
question
yeah.
at the top of the chat box? What is the status of the renewal for Combine? Wondering when coordinators should expect to see the renewal and new consent forms.
Any day, certainly before the end of the year. Great question. We've been back and forth with the central IRB. Every time we answer their questions, they have a few more, but we really are hoping to get this wrapped up, any day. Other questions that I may have missed? No. Okay. Then our last order of business for today is to discuss a new paper-based form that we're calling an outcome verification form. As many of you are aware, all of our combined analyses are a time to event type of analysis, and the event is reaching any one of the defined endpoints that indicate either failure to respond or loss of response. These are all stated in the protocol, and they are the things like not weaning off of prednisone by 16 weeks, being on prednisone for more than 10 cumulative weeks after week 16, not achieving a remission by week 26, having 2 visits that indicate active disease after week 26, and the like. What we need to program in for each of these patients is the precise date that the very first endpoint was met. And so Janine, our study monitor, and the rest of our central combined team are in the process of sorting through all of the data that you all have put into the combined database and have entered into provider reviews for patients who have appeared to meet one or more primary endpoints. And we're working really hard to try to resolve discrepancies. There are situations where the provider review indicates that an outcome was met. For example, the provider says the patient failed to wean off of prednisone by week 16, but we can't find evidence of that in the database. For example, the combined database has a date of stopping prednisone that is prior to week 16. So that would trigger a discrepancy or flag. Conversely, sometimes the data suggests that an outcome is met. The SPCDAI was elevated on 2 or more visits, but we can't find evidence of that in a provider review. And so, next slide. We are trying to comb through all of this data now. Many of you have received queries from Janine regarding this. I want to personally thank all of you for your patience and for all of the back and forth with us as we sort out this process. A lot of it requires some reinterpretation of what in retrospect is a shade of gray within the protocol, and reinterpretation given that our trial is meant to be nested within routine clinical care with very wide visit windows and the like. So thanks to all of the sites who have participated in some of these back and forth discussions as we try to get a handle on all of this. Ultimately, for each patient who meets an outcome, we will work with the site to complete a one-page outcome verification form. This will be a paper form that gets emailed or faxed into UNC and really has 2 data points. One, the date that the first outcome or outcomes were met, and the second is the name of those outcome or outcomes. And we'll work with sites to clean up the data so that the data in the database and the data in the provider review and this outcome verification form all triangulate to the same thing. And then we can have a high degree of confidence when we pass all of this information on to our biostatisticians. And probably more on this in January. Next slide. And I guess that is our last slide. So I'm happy to take any questions that you have about the provider verification form or anything else in our last 3 minutes. And if you have questions for Kim or Shahzad as well, we can take those.
If some coordinators have any questions about Slack, there was a link sent out in the newsletter, I believe yesterday. So they can actually check on that link and get some more information about Slack if they want.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of month. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. And continue recruiting and following patients diligently, at least up to the Christmas time. I know many of you may be taking off between Christmas and New Year's, so December may be a short month. So let's make up for it over the next 2 weeks. Thanks, all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.